Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and today we're going to be covering what is TMUX and GNU Screen. And pretty much they're multiplexers that allow you to be able to amplify your terminal sessions into multiple virtual sessions. And that allows you to run multiple processes at the same time while being able to maintain your actual interaction with them as you would as if you were running it from a local terminal. So let's get right into it. We're going to try out a few commands, and we're also going to compare the differences between the two, and you can see which one is better for yourself. So let's get right into it. So here we have a Raspberry Pi 5. It doesn't particularly matter what it actually is. It is running Alpine Linux in this particular case, just because I think it's continuing the series in terms of what is available inside of Alpine Linux. And I've already done the setup, and I've already installed the actual TMUX and Screen applications. And I just did that by doing apk add TMUX and apk add Screen. And what they are is pretty much they'll create a virtual terminal. And you can do this either through SSH or through the local terminal itself to be able to actually run any command like you normally would within your regular terminal. You can also create virtualized daemons, things like that, to have them run in the background while you're doing other things. So there's a few things. So we're going to cover TMUX first, and it will in effect kind of cover Screen as well. But in order to run TMUX, after it's installed, we just type TMUX. If I spell it right. So once we run it, we see we're right back at the command prompt. We see the screen bar along the bottom, right? So right down here. And pretty much that's telling us that we're inside of this particular session. But we can run anything that we would want normally. And it's not like a chroot. And a chroot is just like a self-contained root of the OS, so it's kind of like running a virtual machine almost inside of your computer. This is actually just like another terminal window. So anything that we do here, like if we were to add FFmpeg, for example, when we install it, if we were to exit this, we can see FFmpeg is installed, assuming it doesn't freeze up, which it did. Let's try it. Let's see. That hasn't happened before. I'm going to switch over. For some reason, it stopped output going only to the regular screen. Let's try that again. Well, let's use a different example. We're not going to be using FFmpeg today, but we are going to be just doing some demonstrating commands using loops to be able to actually get it to work. So let's just clear that out. So, point being is that it does exist. So I'm not sure why it's not going into the computer, anything else like that. Murphy's Law, that figures. But at the end of the day, it's easy enough to be able to run commands from it. It will affect the base operating system, and you can use it to be able to run multiple applications that require user input. So if you're doing like an install script, something else like that, or something like FFmpeg is a good example for that because you can use key commands to be able to affect it. So realistically, you know, it's a good use case for it, but there are other applications that can also benefit from it. And pretty much anything that you can run in your regular terminal, you can run in this as well. So once we're actually in a TMUX session, if we were to run, like let's say we'll run top, because top will run perpetually. Okay, and it will just show us what's currently running on our machine. But if we wanted to detach from it and do something else while keeping this particular process running, we can hit Control B followed by D, and detach from the screen session, or from the TMUX session. So if we wanted to see what sessions we currently had running, we would type TMUX-ls, or TMUX-ls, excuse me. And we see that we have one that was created at this time, and it's just a regular window. It's not referring to Windows, the operating system. It's just saying that it's a brand new session. And we didn't have a command going into it. We didn't give it a name, nothing like that. So to attach to it, we can just do TMUX attach -t and then the session name, which looks like it's just Windows at this point. Or actually one. Too many arguments. There we go. We only have one running, and we didn't name it. If we did name it with the -t beforehand, it would have actually gone through. So let's just do that. So I'm going to type exit to close out that screen session. If we do TMUX-T, and we'll call it test. It should do it. Well, point being, we get the idea. I'll show you screen just to compare. So screen works, I'm a lot more familiar with screen. I've never actually used TMUX in production before. I have just played around with it a little bit before this stream, but I've used screen pretty much forever, but it's a much older tool. And supposedly there's some additional features in TMUX and things like that. And we'll go through what I found in terms of just comparing the data sheets and manuals and things like that. But pretty much it works kind of the same way. So for screen, just looking at it here, we could type screen, we can do the same thing. You know, so we hit spacebar to enter, it gave us a little rundown of everything. But right now we're inside of the screen session. So we can do the same exact thing. Now notice there's no green bar along the bottom, so it's not necessarily easy to tell that you're inside of a screen session. But if we hit Control A and D, we detach from the screen session. So already, you know, we see some similarities there. TMUX is Control B, screen is Control A, but both of them use D to detach. And then we can do screen-ls, and that will show us that we have a screen session currently available, and it's detached. So if we do screen-r, and in this case, 4097 is actually the PID number for that particular process, and we could just type that shorthand. All we have to do is match up part of the name, and as long as it's unique, it will connect right to it. So if we do -r, and then we do 4097, we see that it connects right back in. And we can X out of that, we can do exit, and we see the screen session terminated. So very similar functionality in terms of what they do. And both of them are actively managed, just so you're aware, but pretty much there's not really many new features being added to screen, just because it's so old and it's pretty much its use case is established. So there's really no reason to add any additional functionality, while TMUX supposedly is adding some additional features, things like that, and is in active development. So once we're inside of, for example, TMUX, we can do window management. So let's do that as well. So under TMUX, we can do top, we'll have this running here. Then we can do Control B, E, Control B, C, and that will create another one. So we see at the bottom, we have top, and then we see Ash is the next one because we're in the Ash terminal. So once we run something, that will change, but pretty much it's showing us a list across the bottom of our available windows. So it's kind of like using window switching to be able to do this. So if you have SSH open, and normally you would open a second terminal window to be able to accomplish this, you can actually just use one SSH session and use TMUX to be able to do that same thing. So if we wanted to switch between these different sessions, so like if we said, let's do date, just so we have some output on the screen that we can compare, we can do Control B, and then we can do 0 for our previous window. So now we're connected to top, and we see the asterisk down here at the bottom. We see that move. So it goes between the left and the right. So if we do Control B again and hit 1, we see that asterisk move again. And the dash means that nobody's connected to it. So we can rename all these windows too, because it's generating the names based on the commands that we're actually running. So the way that we would actually do that is Control B. And again, we're attached to the Ash terminal right now. Then we're going to do a comma, and we see that it pops up with what we want to name it. So we can call this test 2. Right? And we see that changed at the bottom of the screen there. And if we want to close the window, so let's say we're done with test 2, right? We can do exit, but we can also do Control B and an X. And then it's asking if we want to kill it. So if there's a process that won't end, and we don't want to have to exit out of SSH or exit out of the terminal, we can actually just do this and it will force kill the process within it. And we can do the same kind of thing with screen as well. So let's do the same thing here. Let's exit out of this. And now we see we're back to the desktop because we've killed all of our open sessions. So let's do screen. We can, let's just run it as it is. Right, but we can do Control A, which will bring us up to the bottom, and pretty much it's the same kind of commands. And let's do comma and C as well. And let's do Control A, Control D, ls, screen, excuse me, ls. We see we have the one available. Let me remember. Yeah, so there is a way to do it with key commands, but I'll show you the easier way to do it. So when you do screen, what I usually do is I will start things in a process, and we've used this before for the clock in particular, but we did DMS. So D is daemon, M, we can actually just do a -- help and actually have something we can look at. So we have the D, right? So we have the detach. Oh no, I'm opening up Windows things. Right, so detach and log out, etc. M, it's just going to be a new session. And then capital S is what we want to name the socket connection. And we see usually it's pid.tty.host. Instead, it will be pid.sockname. So if we do screen -s and we give it a name, let's say test 1, it will bring us straight into it. It won't give us that extra prompt, anything else like that. We can run our prompt, we can run our command, then hit Control A and hit Control D. Now we can do screen -ls, and we see we have the 2 open screen sessions. So if we screen back into our TTY, which is 4112, we see there's not anything currently running there, but we could do date just so we have a little bit of output there. We can exit. We see 119, 4119, or just do test 1, and we see we can get in there as well. And the way that we can also exit it is we could do Control A and I believe X as well, not ampersand, but so no, that did kill it. Yeah, it's a little bit different. But the easiest way to actually exit it is just to do Control C or do exit. And we see that it will terminate the screen. So now we only have that one available. So we can just do screen-r because it matches that. Exit that as well. So now we're outside of screen. We see we're back to the regular prompt. It doesn't have the shorthand tilde indicating it, but that's really the only indication that there's actually a screen running. So for TMUX, there is also the ability to do pane management and PANE. So you can watch multiple windows simultaneously. And this is one of the key advantages of TMUX over screen. Screen, it literally just takes over the entire screen. But TMUX will allow you to do side-by-side work. So for that, if we start a TMUX session, right? So we're here. Let's do top. We can start a new terminal window by doing Control B, C. We'll do date, and then we can split the current pane horizontally by doing Control B and the %sign. Right, so now we've created another terminal window. And let's come up with something else. We'll do cat motd. Oh, I'm sorry, /etc/motd. And we see it's just like our regular login prompt. So as we're actually going through it, it gives us the option to be able to switch back and forth. But how do we do that? So to actually go between the two panes, we would use Control B and then the arrow keys. Right, so now we're over here. Right, and we can go through, we can do it just as we want to. And since we're doing that, we can go over here. And actually, I don't want to get ahead, but short form is, now we can do two things at once. We can reference a document, for example, if we wanted to copy the MOTD file, we just catted it to the screen, and now we can copy it over into part of another file. So we can reference what we're actually working on without having to have two screens up or having two SSH sessions. So it offers a lot of flexibility in that regard. There is another way that we can actually look at it, which is also doing a vertical view. So if we do Control B, and then we do the double quote, so we do Shift and double quote, we actually can stack them vertically as well. So now you see we have 3 terminal sessions open. Now I do want to point out that this is different than the other session that we already have open. So we can still switch back to that by doing Control B and 0, and then can do Control B and 1, and we see that it preserves our actual window layout based on how we've actually done it. And again, we can just exit the screen or do Control B and ampersand. Actually, this will kill the entire thing, so let's not do that. But point being is you got a lot of flexibility. You can kind of manage it as separate instances of SSH if you're on another machine. But since this is something that actually runs within the terminal itself, you could just really run it on any local Linux instance without having to worry about it. And it can offer things like scroll back, things like that, but I don't think we're going to go into that here. So now that we've actually seen that, and we can do Control B, X, do we want to kill the pane? Yes. So now we're back to our main Ash window with no split screens, anything else like that. So if we want to share this, for example, it's actually possible to give it a name so that way others can connect to it at the same time and see what we're currently working on. So to share it, we would have to give it a name socket. So let's actually just exit out of everything. And let's start it from scratch, just so we're starting from a good place. So we're going to do the capital S, just like we did with screen. And again, it's naming the socket connection. And we're going to give it the path to a file instead of just a name. So we're going to do /temp /shared connection, or shared session, if I'm going to follow my notes, which I think is probably a good idea. So we see that we just created this, and pretty much it looks exactly the same. So let's just do date. Now, if we were to go over to another machine, so in this case, let's go over to a Windows machine and actually connect into this and link up to that session. So we'll do our nice connection here. We'll log in as root, give it an extremely secure password. Excellent, and we're in. So now if we do TMUX ls, spelling it correctly, it does say there's nothing running, but we have it as a defined socket connection. So if we actually ls/temp, we do see shared session listed there, and that's actually where it is. So if we do the same exact command that we did with a little addendum. So if we do tmux -s/temp/shared session, and we can do tab for auto completion, and then attach. Right, we see that it's there. We can type a few things. So let's do echo hello world. Right, and we see that echoed there. If we switch back to our original console, we do see that it in fact put everything out that we were currently looking at on the other terminal and put it here. So you may be asking, what are all those dots around the edge? It has to match the actual terminal output view. So it's going to default to whatever the smallest is, and it's going to fill that space with the extra dots. So that way you're not overflowing your view on your other monitor, especially if you're looking at it full screen or on another Linux terminal itself where you don't have the ability to scroll. You're going to have problems. So that's how it handles that. But both of us are currently looking, by both of us, I mean both the Windows SSH terminal and the local console that we're looking at here are viewing the same terminal at the same time and can interact with it the same. So now that we've actually gone in and done the session, we can exit this by doing Control B and D to detach. And if we go over to our SSH terminal, we can see that it's still connected here. So we can continue to update it. So we'll do date, go back over here, we can reattach to the same shared socket. And we see that it's exactly the way that we left it. So, excellent. So let's go ahead and exit this. There's other options here. I might skip through them just because it's getting a little in there. But there's some, I'm just going to talk about it. So there's something called session persistence, and it automatically restores TMUX sessions on login. So for example, if you wanted to have a TMUX session by default, you could modify your bashrc file or your ZSHRC file, because again, this is cross-platform, everything else like that. And you can put TMUX attach or TMUX new, and pretty much it will attach to a session that you have, or it will automatically create a new one if nobody has created one before. So if you've never logged in, like you just started up the machine, you can then create a new TMUX session. So it's pretty useful. That way you can always have it handy, you can exit it, you can log out, and it's just going to persist in the background. So there are other options as well. So in terms of customization, you can change your settings by editing, creating or editing a .tmux.conf file in your user directory. So like if I exit here, if I do ls-la in the local folder, we see there's no file here, but we can make a, and I'll show you the actual format, but it's, so we'll do .conf, and the dot at the beginning just means that it's a hidden file. But no directories, anything else like that. And pretty much we can, let's VI into there and we'll actually set one setting. And what we could do is we'll put set option. We'll do -G prefix C-A. Right, so I'll add that to everything that we currently run. So prefix key. And then we can just use TMUX normally. Right, we can detach from it. And this changes it. Sorry, let me explain. And I'm typing the wrong keys as I do this. So the prefix for Control-A, D gives it more of a screen-like user interface. So instead of doing Control-B, we change it to Control-A. That's what the C-A prefix is. Right? So Control and then A. And you can actually do the same things in Screen as well if you wanted, if you have more familiarity or comfort with one or the other. But you have the option to do that. And now for the rest of this, I'm gonna have to remember to do that. So, and I don't know why I'm typing :Q. We're not editing it. So, there's a few other options available to this, which is we can enter copy mode. So if, let's say we're in TMUX, and let's cat a file. Let's do MOTD again. Right, so we see some stuff here. If we do a Control-B, in this case, this is why it's annoying, but I have to do Control-A, but it's going to be Control-B by default, and then the open square bracket. What it'll allow us to do is with the arrow keys, we can go up and pretty much be able to select text. So the way that we would actually select the text is we would do the space. So if we want to say, we want to copy how-to guide, we would choose our first start position, then we would choose our end position, and hit enter. This is not ergonomic. And assuming it works, it will actually copy that text to a pseudo clipboard. Oh, this is going to be a nightmare. You got to figure out how to Is it still in edit mode? I think it is. So what it's supposed to be is that you navigate around, you choose your start position, you press the space bar, then you choose you go to your end position and you press enter. Then we can paste it by doing Control-B and pressing the close bracket. For some reason, it's not responding to enter. Don't know why. Maybe a difference. Because it still says 0 out of 0. If you look up here in the right-hand corner, that's the actual number of characters that you have copied. Or start position, end position, but it's not actually going through and copying anything. So that's not at all concerning. But again, I'm not familiar with TMUX, and this screen doesn't have this type of functionality that I'm aware of or have ever used. So let's see. So let's just try it once more. Right, so we hit Control B, open square bracket. That brings us into copy mode. Right, we're gonna copy setup Alpine, or let's copy MOTD. Hit spacebar. We're gonna go find our end position. Hit enter. Then we're gonna scroll down, hit Control B and close bracket, and it doesn't work at all. So that's one of those things where the documentation does not appear to be in line with the actual implementation of the program, and that's kind of annoying. I don't know if this is because it's an older version of it, to where it doesn't have that capability, but it appears to be trying. It just may not be the right key commands defined, and considering that we didn't change it, that is kind of annoying. But point being is we can also do scripting and automation to be able to use this, and we have used that in the past with Screen. And Screen I like a lot for that because you do the -D flag and it will do pretty much a daemon-like operation where it will be completely headless, it'll ignore all input, and it pretty much be a detached session from the get-go while being able to supply a command by default. So if we wanted to do that, we can do Screen -DM and capital S, and then we can just give it the command that we actually want to run, which in this case is just going to be, we have to define a name. So let's call it test1, and then we give it the command that we want, which in this case is going to be top. We hit it, we see nothing happens, but if we do Screen-ls, we do see that it exists and it's detached. And now if we do Screen-R and then we do test1, we see that it's currently running. Now, you notice something with the output where it was kind of split screen there for a second. And that's because by default, it runs with a much smaller terminal size than what your actual default is for your physical screen. So if you don't attach to it at all, you'll often see this, especially with things that have output that scrolls across where it updates it by doing a carriage return. You'll see it start to wrap around and things like that if it can't fit it all on the screen, just because it kind of breaks it. But if you do connect to it, it will automatically resize to your screen. But we see our command that we were already running is running. So we can Control A and D out of there, and it continues to run in the background while we do other work. So it's a great way if you want to have multiple services started, but still be able to go in and look at them. So that way you're actually able to see if there's errors and be able to perform more effective troubleshooting. This is definitely the way to go. So, and that's part of the reason why I like it so much, mainly Screen in particular. But again, TMUX is just a direct analog of that, just slightly different. Sometimes change is good, sometimes change isn't, but go with what you're most comfortable with. So something I also wanted to cover is just, and this is more just discussion points, because that's kind of the baseline of what they are and what they do and things like that. There's a lot more nuance to it that I'm not covering, mainly because, you know, it's been around for a while, so there's been a lot of time for very specific use case development based on what people are trying to do. You can also do things like stuffing commands and things like that from outside of the terminals to be able to affect the behavior within it. And that's actually something that's nice for doing scripting, things like that, where I often use Screen, for example, to be able to launch init scripts. And from there, when I exit them, because they're running as daemon services that I can attach to and etc., those are things that I would actually need to create a custom stop function for the init script in order to exit it. And I use the stuff command to actually insert a quit operation to be able to do that. So let's go through a few pros and cons of each one. So for TMUX, it's modern and actively developed. You know, it has a nice UI where it's very clear that you're inside of a TMUX session. And I think that's definitely an advantage. It's not as ambiguous as Screen. And it has some enhanced features like doing the split screens, things like that, the screen switching within the single window. with just hotkeys. I think that's something that's really nice. That is not a bad thing for being able to do development on a Linux terminal itself without having to have a separate window manager. It's based on a client and server architecture. We saw we had the multiple connections to Screen, and it had the ability to accommodate differences between them, as well as be able to keep the information up to date. And then the window and pane management, which I said, and the ability to do some customization. But there are some cons to it, just noting one of them is the learning curve, because it is all key command based, and it's not necessarily clear right from the get-go. If you're doing development for the first time on Linux, it may be a little bit too much to jump straight into the deep end on that. You may be more comfortable with a GUI. So I don't think it's a replacement for like a regular Raspberry Pi OS, for example, full implementation that you might be more comfortable doing development on. But if you're trying to keep everything lightweight and only run this type of operation when you need it, it is something that kind of sticks to that principle of being as minimalist as possible, so you can devote as much system resources to be able to run your actual code. And then limited compatibility. So while TMUX is widely supported on most Unix-like systems, it's definitely not installed by default on pretty much any of them, just like Screen. Screen is not installed by default either. So depending on how old your system is, especially with TMUX, it may not be compiled or supported for all variations, or it may not be up to date. Where Screen, because it's so old, it is something that pretty much has stayed the same for like the past 20 years. So it is something where you can easily be able to trust that if you're running on modern hardware, you're probably going to be able to interface and use Screen if you know it on the current version. And some of the other pros about Screen is that it has widespread availability. It may be pre-installed, but it's easily available. I mean, it's just as available as TMUX through package managers, but just something to keep in mind. And then it has incredible stability. I've been very happy with it for running services over the long term, where I want to be able to dip into it only when there's a problem. And just having it be able to run in the background, it doesn't have memory leaks, it doesn't have a lot of problems with actually being able to run these services long term. So at the end of the day, it's very stable. And then familiarity, there's a lot of available, people who have been programming for a while are used to Screen. And so you'll find a lot of documentation on it. You'll find a lot of, I would say, advanced implementation guidance and things like that for very practical use cases that can make it very easy to be able to onboard, or at least relatively easy. I don't want to say it's easy. It's not easy, but I would say relatively easy to be able to onboard and be able to kind of find the information that you need. But I will say this is huge caveat. Do not search Google for Screen. It will give you the monitor Screen information. You have to search for GNU Screen. So that's a critical difference there. So I would say that's one major thing TMUX has going for it, is that it's a unique enough command name that it's not going to overlap with other things. And then let's see, backwards compatibility, things like that. I think we covered that already. It's very old. So, but some of the cons are that it has limited features. So it's not going to be as advanced. It's just going to kind of do that one thing, but it will do it really well. But again, TMUX has the windowing capability, which I think is very attractive for being able to provide better workflows. I haven't used the copy and paste, so I can't speak to that, but the theory of it, I think, is really nice, in the same way that copy and pasting for other things is really nice, within a GUI. It has less active development in GNU Screen, and while it is currently maintained, once again, I will say that, it's not something that they're adding features. People are happy with what it is for those who are using it. And I would say that it's not widely It's not widely used unless you're using text-based consoles a lot. And then it has a single client mode. They have added, I believe, recently some ability to do multi-client modes, things like that, where you can share screen sessions, things like that. I haven't actually had a use case where I've needed that in particular, but it is something where I have seen documentation surrounding it. But obviously your deployment and your particular OS variation for what is available may vary. So both TMUX and GNU Screen are very powerful for managing the terminal sessions, but obviously you got to weigh your strengths and weaknesses for what each one offers based on what's important to you and the application that you're running. So you don't want to be in a circumstance where it's you need all of these, you have all of these GUI interfaces available through TMUX, but you're never actually going to use them because it's running headless and you're never going to connect to it. So, do you need something that has all of that additional code overhead, or do you just need something more basic and lightweight? So, again, it just comes down to what's a value for you. Maybe when you're troubleshooting, you need to look at 2 or 3 things simultaneously to be able to contrast and compare them. So it makes a lot more sense to be able to do that. Or you need to look at it with multiple people. So having that shared socket capability is important to you as well. So we're just going to keep it a short video for today, a short live stream as it were, but VOD after the fact. So thanks for watching the stream today. If you like it, please be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment down below. And if you know anybody who would like this content, be sure to share it with them. I would appreciate it, and I hope they would appreciate it too. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm, and then hit that notification bell. That way you know the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.